works. Pretty much that's the way I am with all things digital. So here I am with a lecture, but unable to figure out what collection of things will allow me to share it with you. So eventually I got a friend to help, and so it should be good, but yeah, I'm sorry that it wasn't on time. That being said, though, we got to let everybody in. All right.
How are you doing, Mike?
It's nice to see you. So we got plenty more. Admit all. There ought to be something that allows you just to admit everybody all, once and for all. But okay, first things first. Then, how many of you read The Republic, Book One?
I have.
I
Okay,
have.
I'm happy to see it. All right, great. If you haven't, get back to it. Okay. What I'm going to try and show you over the course of a year is what I see here. All right, and that takes some work actually, and that's why I have all these things that are peripheral but necessary to understanding what Plato is doing, including some of the other Platonic dialogues. I think Plato's Republic is the greatest book ever written. I'm going to try and justify that claim. And I have had people call me on it in many different contexts, but, I just dig my heels in, and I'll try and justify that to you folks. All right. How many of you found the first book? Or first of all, how many of you read it before this? Anybody?
I have.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. It's something that we see. It's something people are willing to do, giving people a fragment of the Republic. Usually it's book 6 when they talk about the cave and saying, aha, I'm going to cut out these dozen pages. And now you have read Plato. No, you haven't. All right. You've read Plato, but this is a work of art. Reading excerpts of Plato is like reading the third act of Hamlet. I mean, I like that act as much as any act in any play, but you should actually read the entirety of it, because you don't really get to understand the sense that's being made here if you're going to read a piece. Now, I understand that's necessary for the purposes of education. I mean, people's capacities for reading are sometimes not up to the challenge. But if it is, Plato will teach you how to read, and it means that you have to read the whole giant 300-page book. What I'm going to show you here is that the effort is worth it. All right. That being said, since you have read at least a portion of the Republic before, and at least book 1 now, most of you seem to have read it. What'd you think? Somebody's supposed to think something. Go ahead.
I enjoyed it very much.
Okay, why?
The very first thing he says, I went down he went down the divide line. He came down to the Piraeus. He left his dwelling, up here, and descended to the sensual pleasures, even though he was doing it, for good reason.
Well, that's a very fine point. I mean, you go to the head of the cave, you found something very important. All the main themes of the entire 300-odd page book are stated on the first page. It's in some ways similar to a fact. Those of you who have studied or are studying mathematics, the answer to all your exam questions are on the first page of your math textbook. That's where they define things. All right. And from the definitions, they're going to work out logical extrapolations. And that's what math is, whether it's first grade or you're getting a PhD. Right? All works the same way. Now, those of you who are familiar with Plato and the Republic know that Plato loves his math. Right. Something you should consider is that mathematics is God's gift to Platonists. Because whenever people start to get wonky and start to talk about their subjective feelings and their perspective, and the fact that everyone is situated differently, and it's always a question, as the Big Lebowski says, it's just your opinion, man. And whenever people give me that sort of crap, I just start asking them about arithmetic, and that very quickly just cuts the nonsense right out of here, because nobody believes that they're doing special arithmetic. That's called being crazy. And none of you would accept that in the practical world. So that is my way of trying to get around most. Hello? I think I heard somebody.
Yeah, mute your mic, guys, if you're not talking. I think someone just had the mic on, Mike.
Okay, all right. So, okay, here's something for you guys. For you folks to remember. If you're in a discussion with someone that wants to take a perspectival or subjective view of knowledge, when people start babbling about their truth, well, look, the truth is not dependent on any of us. And the only truth we have, as far as I can tell, is universal to everybody. I think what they're trying to do is cover up a statement about their feelings by giving it a promotion to the truth. Now, maybe the truth about how you feel, but that's very different from the truth about any given state of affairs. So one of the things that Plato's great for is for stopping sophists back then and now. Somebody tries to get all how can I put it, evasive with you and say, you think this and I think that. You just go straight to arithmetic. You tell them that's not socially constructed. That's the way it is, which is why everybody does the same arithmetic. It's not like when we move from language to language, 4 means something else. No, it doesn't. So that's Plato's strong point. You could think of the epistemology of the Greeks as an elaborate exercise trying to are supposed to be equal. If you say to somebody, well, look, I'm doing special arithmetic where you owe all of this and I don't know any. Well, that has a defect of not being arithmetic, right? Nobody believes that. No one wants to put up with it. So that's the crack that you're now going to start to put some leverage on. You see what I'm saying? That's Plato's first thing he goes to. Do you remember in the first book when he's talking to Socrates talking to Thrasymachus, and Thrasymachus says, don't tell me that the good is the useful or the wise or the prudent. And Plato comes back and says to him, or Socrates comes back and says, well, that's like telling me that I'm not allowed to say that 12 is 3 times 4 or 2 times 6 or 5 plus 7. And Thrasymachus says it has nothing to do with that. Now, we know, given what Socrates believes about math, which is it's pretty close to being sacred. Whenever Socrates starts talking about arithmetic or starts talking about geometry, that's like seeing a boxer put a horseshoe in his glove. It means Socrates is about to knock somebody out, right? Because when he reaches for arithmetic, he says, look, you're trying to be real smooth and real evasive and very deceptive, but I won't let you do that. I'm going to bring you back to stuff that I know to be true and that you're not going to be able to get around. Okay. What else did you notice?
Well, I have a couple of
Yeah.
things to say. Well, I remember what you once said in one of your seminars they put in the idea store that in every page in the Republic, everything's the good stuff. And
Yeah.
as right as you are, I can't help but find that book 1 in particular, it's a bit denser than the rest. It's very demanding, even the first couple of pages. And
It
so
certainly
really,
is.
yeah, and the ground that we're covering today certainly is a lot. And well, I suppose the first thing I would like to ask is, what do you think constitutes a good reader? I mean, this is a very dense and difficult text. What sort of skills would a reader really need to get the most out of Plato?
Plato will teach you how to read at the same time that he's teaching you how to think. So this book is put together with a care that is quite literally unimaginable in the following sense. You have never seen a book that does what this book, what I will show you that this book does. And in addition to that, it has never actually entered your imagination that a book could possibly do what I am going to show you that this book does. Teaching Plato's Republic is a little bit like selling the Vegematic on late night TV. You know, it slices, it dices, it mows your lawn, it cleans the cobwebs off the ceiling. You know, it pays your parking tickets. I mean, it does everything you could possibly do and a whole bunch of other stuff. So I would be inclined to say that a careful reader, a slow reader, and a reader that doesn't assume that he understands what's going on. That's look, I've been burned by Plato too many times because look, you can read a particular line or a particular paragraph as being ironic, and then later on, after reconsidering, you may decide that he means that literally. And then after that, you may decide that it's not clear whether it's ironic or literal. And then it will dawn on you that it may be both. So plagiarism, I mean, so he's either telling you X or not X, or both X and not X, or nothing else. He's just messing, right? So Plato, remember, is a poet. And what we have here is a fusion of philosophy and poetry. You're familiar with the story of Socrates meeting Plato in the Agora and going home and burning his tragedies. Well, he's decided that he can step up and write and create a new art form that unifies ethics and aesthetics. All right. So what kind of reader do we need? The kind you are. I mean, if you're interested and you actually have a desire to learn, that's what comes first. I can show you a lot of the other stuff. Go ahead, somebody. I got a whole bunch of raised hands. How about up there? Kevin Hine, what's the deal? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, hello. Hey, hi. So I just had speaking of that, that was kind of my question. I forget the exact line at the moment, but when Thrasymachus is introduced, Socrates says that he leaps out and he startles Socrates. I'm like, this has to be ironic, right? Like Socrates sees Thrasymachus coming and is going to hit him with a horseshoe in his glove.
Okay. Well, remember that he hasn't put the horseshoe in yet. And it's not ironic in the sense that, well, Thrasymachus is frightening, but not for the reason Thrasymachus thinks he is frightening. Thrasymachus, like all sophists, is a philosopher who got a bad education. And when these guys go bad, they go really bad. So Thrasymachus is analogized to a predatory animal, right? He's described as a lion, and he's also described as a wolf. Now, this is going to be something, a set of images that we're going to have repeated throughout the Republic. The shepherd is the king. The guardians are like the dogs that guard the flock, and the ordinary people are like a flock. And Thrasymachus is a wolf, not a shepherd. All right. And the point then is that he is trying the flock, whereas Socrates points out every art is concerned with what is with the good of what it concerns itself with, not the good of the artist. So a doctor, as a doctor, is concerned with healing, not with making big money. They may make big money, but that's not essential to doctoring. Same sort of thing with any kind of art, any kind of techne in Greek. Okay. So when it comes to politics, if the political ruler, the tyrant, is only interested in himself, that's like the doctor being only interested in himself. But he neglects the political art. That techne involves orienting your policy towards a common good, which is disclosed through reason. Does that make sense? Well, I'll take.
Yes, Dr. Sugrue. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure. Next, AA Poblete 20.
Hi. Hello,
Hi,
can you
what's
hear
up?
me?
Yeah.
My name is Andres.
Hi, Andres.
Sorry about the username.
All right.
So I guess what I noticed was, I guess the first time I read this was back in 2019 when I was 19.
Good.
And the first thing I noticed was how easy it was to read. Not easy, but like the way, I guess what I wrote here in my notes, like the way in which like a really good song uh with a lot of layers behind it is instantly like, oh, this is a lot, this goes down the throat a lot easier than other, like, so I felt like the way in which, I mean, even now, like compared to all the other philosophy that I've read, it's so streamlined from the get-go that I still haven't read anything
around that I'll be able to take you to. One of the interesting things, and I had never noticed this before, but it was published, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. Guy named Jay Kennedy. He's a computer scientist, and he really likes Plato. And he broke down a number of the dialogues, and the Republic was one of them. The Greeks had a 12-tone scale. Within 1 or 2%, the Republic breaks into 12 portions, and they're marked off by references to music. And what he thinks is that there's a disguised set of musical compositions that the words represent, which is, look, if you told me that anybody else did something like that, I'd say, get out of here. That's stupid. You're projecting this onto there. But once I show you what Plato does and can do, I am perfectly open to the possibility that this is a disguised series of musical compositions. For all I know, it may involve a really stunning group of seafood recipes. It may solve, the rainy day. I don't know, but I will show you that this covers more ground in more ways than I can keep up with. And I've read it at least 50 times. So, I mean, for me, this is like coming back to the Beethoven symphonies. If I had a career as a conductor, I mean, these books in particular, Plato, but these are my old friends. And so when I came back and reread this, I'm looking at this and saying, I see how this integrates. I want to get you to that point. It's not an easy thing to do. That's why we need the background reading to make sense of it. Okay. Yeah. Plato is more complicated than you think. In the 7th letter, which is probably the only one that is genuine, if any of them are, Plato says that he has a secret esoteric doctrine that he doesn't tell anybody. He keeps it hidden because this is a book that's not written for everybody. If you know, those of you who have read the whole Republic know that it ends on a myth, the myth of right? That's about a dead guy who goes to the place where dead people go and he gets judged, but he's not really dead. So he comes back up to tell everybody what's going on.
Oh, so here I am.
Yeah. Okay. And when that happened, Plato's Spezzatura, that's beautiful. Exactly right. Plato makes really hard stuff look easy. Right. So at the end of the Republic, we get a myth. And what that is something like a child safety cap on dangerous medicine. You don't want idiots, if they're persevering enough to actually get to the end of this book, to take out these ideas, because it's like giving a child a loaded gun. No, instead, if you didn't understand the first 295 pages, we got 5 pages at the end of a scary story about a guy who lived a life that was immoral. Get ready for this. And his immoral life made him worried when he got old. But he realized he was rich from being bad. So he could sacrifice and sacrifice and sacrifice and bribe the gods so he gets out of hell free. It's like the selling of indulgences, right? In medieval Europe. Here's a get out of hell free card. In other words, that final myth is directed towards Cephalus and the 99% of our species that are like Cephalus, who can't be taught the real facts of the world. So you have to give them stories that get them to act as if they knew what was going on. So we
Yeah.
we launched Cephalus. We got him out of here in the first book. He's not coming back. But should Cephalus ever find this written down, and he should take the time out from killing animals to read it, he would come at the end with a story he finally did understand, which is you can't bribe the gods. And when you die, you get judged perfectly honestly and perfectly righteously, and you're going to get justice whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
This is the kind of myth that needs to supersede Homer.
Mm. Something because I did but I mean now that I'm like rereading it, but the first time I did read it, like I didn't notice this. I didn't notice that like child safety lock that you bring up until you pointed it out. But now looking back, I without knowing it, I like kind of skipped the end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't
Yeah.
know I because I was
Yeah.
like well, he just almost spent the whole book talking about like sophistry and myth making, and I was like, lol, why do I need this? So I just stopped reading.
Well, let me show you why.
Yeah.
The book has a structure.
Mhm.
Uh, it's like a bell curve. Yeah,
Mhm.
I assume most of you know that. Okay, we're going to lock off book one, separate that, bracket it, because that's actually the prelude or the foyer to the main ballroom. Okay, so bracket book one. It means we got 9 books coming. All right, so we're going to have 4 leading upwards, right? And you know what upwards means in the Republic? Up we
Yeah.
go. And when we get to the next book after the 4 that we climb, that's going to be book 6, and that's where we're going to climb the divided line out of sensory reality. But then we have to climb back down, which is why we need 4 more books to go down there. We're inverting the process. Now, this is more complicated than you may think. Those of you who have read this are aware that Plato occasionally does numerology, number magic, which is spooky stuff. But remember that Isaac Newton spent most of his career doing numerology from the Bible. Okay, physics was not his main employment. All right, Plato says that the good man is 729 times happier than the wretched, bad, tyrannical man. Okay, and in order to figure out how he did that, what we're going to need is the ancient, well, actually, there's more than one explanation, but I'll give you the one that you'll probably be able to make sense of now. A Greek astronomer had worked the year down to 364.5 days, 364 and a half days. Okay. The 4 upward movements, books 2, 3, 4, and 5, those are the 4 seasons. And that's a year it goes on. And then when you get to book 6, you step out of time altogether, because that's what it means to be climbing the divided line outside of space and time and sense perception. And then after book 6, what you're going to need is 7, 8, 9, and 10, which is 4 more seasons to come back down. Now, you may wonder why we need 2 years in order to get to the point where we don't have time at all. And the reason is this. It's the 1 year going up is 364 and a half days, and the one going down is 364 and a half days. And do any of you know what 364 and a half plus 364 and a half are? That's right, 729. Now, I didn't get there by accident. Nay. Now, I can give you other explanations for the 729 too. I mean, it's a pretty weird set of passages, but the point is you need the second half, because you have to examine how not only how cities improve, but how cities degenerate. And because once you know how cities degenerate, you also know how souls degenerate. And remember that politics is ethics writ large. There's an isomorphism between them, which is why we're looking into things political, because we were concerned with ethics and justice. And now Plato leads us on a trip outside of space and time. We take an entire revolution of the planet, and he's going to mix that up with some pretty amazing uh, numerology. I'll give you the inside just very quickly, and it'll boggle your mind. Think of 5 different kinds of regime. All right, so we got the tyrant, and we got the democrat, and we got the aristocrat, and we got the timocrat, the guy who likes honor, and then we got the philosopher king. Now we're going to need 6 separations for this thing. Fair enough? For the 5 parts? Okay. The height of these things is going to be factors of 3. The reason why is that there are 3 parts to the soul. So we're going to start with 1 and move across using squares and then cubes and then to the 4th power of 3. And so the smallest amount of happiness, that'll be our 1, and that'll go until that'll be the tyrant's happiness until we get to the democrat's happiness, until we get to the happiness of the aristocrat, until we get to the happiness of the timocrat, until we get to the happiness of the philosopher king. Each time we go 3 to the 2nd, 3 to the 3rd, 3 to the 4th, 3 to the 5th, and we finish up with 3 to the 6th. Do any of you know what 3 to the 6th power is? Yes, that's right, 729. So, I mean, believe me, the degree to which this thing is integrated would just make you shake your head. And you're missing some of that very interesting numerology if you're going to leave off the last half. So you really got to get there. You need the myths and you need the decline of the soul in the city. That's my apologia for the second half. I have a very good friend, Darren Staloff, who thinks that book 10 is a waste of time. You don't really need it. And I'm saying, no. But it's a matter of opinion. Those of you who have said that you immediately gravitate towards Plato, people are born either Platonists or Aristotelians. It has something to do with chromosomes, I believe. Early in your education, you're going to like one or the other. It's like being right or left-handed. You can't. It's hard to do both. And I've always loved Plato. It took me a very long time until I was a middle-aged man to really begin to appreciate Aristotle. But no one is, I mean, however encyclopedic Aristotle is, and that's what's great about him, no one has ever accused Aristotle of being poetic. No. I mean, it's like the parts list to the universe. What Plato does is synthesize philosophy and poetry to give us a new conception of human nature, and by implications, the possibilities for education, for politics, for law, for ethics. So Plato is going to attempt to solve all the outstanding intellectual problems of his age in this book. Nice work if you can get it. All right, who's next? Samuel Paul? Is that?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay.
That's me.
Okay.
So, if Socrates was alive today, one of the questions you would be asked is, what is social justice? Is it different from justice? Is it good?
I think he would deny that. He'd say justice is one unified thing. In other words, I remember that Plato and Socrates, on the whole, are allergic to plurality. Wherever you see a bunch of something, they want to turn it into some unified thing, right? So you can have 2 cars plus 2 cars equal 4 cars, and 2 sheep plus 2 sheep equal 4 sheep. You can do that for an infinite number of objects. Plato's only interested in the 2 plus 2 equals 4 part. He wants the structure. And I think that Plato would say that there's no honest society that isn't composed of, or no virtuous society that's not composed of virtuous individuals. Now, he thinks, because he's optimistic and he's a Greek, that it's possible to push people, or if you organize education and institution and law properly, you can get people to the optimum capacity that any of them has, right? So there's no idea here of human insufficiency or the idea that people are intrinsically defective. That's going to come from the Christians with the idea of original sin. But if you don't have that, then there's no reason why it shouldn't be possible to perfect you and you and you and me and everybody else. And while we're on the way of protecting, of perfecting everybody, why not just perfect the world or perfect society? And you'll notice that this society grows slowly, but over time it's going to eventually absorb its neighbors. And the reason it's going to do that is because that's good, because that's the reason it does everything. So Plato is going to give us more to contemplate than to practice. That may be one way of looking at it. One of the worst readings of Plato is reading this as a blueprint for something practical. That's just ridiculous. Well, no, have a look at something like Karl Popper's The Open Society and His Enemies. I mean, a more dense, literal-minded, if given the opportunity, he would decide that the tortoise and the hare was about a foot race. I mean, I find that you can't read Plato like that. I admire much of what Karl Popper did, but his hatchet job on Plato just doesn't work. There's a guy who loved Aristotle from the word go. And people that like Aristotle from the word go think that Plato is too vaporous, too uncertain, too nebulous, and too poetic and too excessive. And what is he talking about exactly? And you gravitate one way or the other, right?
Sorry to interject, but Thomas Jefferson thought the Republic was ridiculous.
Yeah, of course he did. You see the one who said he thought it was a satire? One of the founders did. When I read that, because I'm an American historian, I know the founding, made me want to pound my head on the desk. For God's sake, it could be a lot of things, but a satire it is not. I mean, if brevity is the soul of wit, when have you ever slogged through a 300-page satire which examines from a logical perspective all the different things that you might want to integrate into self and society in this new... My God, there's a lot of things there that are funny, but that doesn't mean Plato isn't completely serious. One of the important things, those of you who know the Gorgias, Callicles at the end steps in and says, is Socrates joking or is he serious? And that was the beginning of the end for Callicles, because Socrates is joking and he's serious. Great playfulness and great seriousness are not incompatible. So he's jerking everybody around, including you and me, and he knows it. And he taunts us into responding, right? And that's good for us because we're only responding because we think we have a better answer than he does. And he's always willing to give us a chance to enlighten him. Now, the bad arguments that we see with Thrasymachus gets shut up and he gets dishonored, he gets humiliated because he doesn't get beaten by good arguments. Socrates says, look, I can take any argument here and smack you about the head and shoulders with it, right? I mean, look, you take a sword and I'm going to take a piece of bamboo and I'm going to chase you all around the camp with it, all right? Because you're no threat to me. And you want to gain glory, but in fact, what I'm going to do is beat you in an ignominious way. What's really going on here is this. This is a fight between Socrates and Thrasymachus over who is going to be the educator of Athens. Both of these guys want the rich boys, as well, Polemarchus, of course, but also Adeimantus and Glaucon. Thrasymachus wants to teach them that might is right, and he wants to get paid big money for it. So Socrates says, well, let's dance, let's have a chat. Thrasymachus tries to get famous, arguing and disparaging Socrates, and Socrates handles him like some sort of kung fu master. I mean, he doesn't break a sweat.